Hello scholarly gamers and welcome to another episode of Streaming Fundamentals. In fact, this will be the first episode of 2018. It's been absolutely ages since we've had an episode, and that's my fault. Been too busy with schoolwork, I'm afraid. But right, so, we've covered a lot of different topics, right? We've talked about, of course, the key ingredient being you. We've talked about platforms. We've talked about streaming from console. We've talked about the type of software you can use if you're streaming from a PC. We've also talked about the type of hardware you can use when streaming from a PC. And we've talked about codecs and bit rates and how they can affect your streaming broadcast as well as the experience for your viewers. So today I want to talk about presentation, and presentation is really a multifaceted aspect, if we're honest. It's worth noting, if you're streaming from console, you're relatively limited, aren't you? Because you'll have your gameplay and then possibly a camera if you're streaming directly from console. And I believe it's only the PlayStation that has Chroma built in. I don't believe the Xbox can do that. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I'm fairly sure that only the PlayStation has that built-in Chroma option. So you get a little bit more control there. But with the Xbox, you don't. Although one of the nice features about the Xbox now is there's actually USB webcam support. You're no longer restricted to using the Kinect 2.0. Even so, that is a brilliant camera. Not everyone likes to have a Kinect hooked up to their Xbox. So yes, if you're on console, you're fairly limited. But at least when it comes into factors like lighting, that will cover you as well. But I really want to talk about presentation from, the PC's perspective when it comes into things like layouts. And of course, we'll discuss lighting and a little bit of audio as well. But presentation it's very much a subjective thing. I mean, first of all, there's just you, right? The actual presentation of you depends completely on your personality and the personality of your channel, what type of community you're trying to actually build. If you're the type of person that just rolls out of bed and your hair's all scruffy, and you're kind of unkept, and that is who you are, and that's what you want to be on stream, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But on the other hand, if you want to try, to give off a bit of a professional type of look, then, you want to put a little bit of effort into making yourself, at least brushing your hair and washing your face. But jokes aside, personal presentation is quite important as well. But it's going to depend really on your direction that you want to take. Let's be honest, there's folk out there that wear costumes and have completely different personas for when they stream, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a case of doing what you want to do, and this is where presentation becomes an issue, because one of the hardest things for a broadcaster or a streamer to do is set yourself apart from the crowd, right? If you're streaming from console and you're not using a camera, it's very, very difficult to make viewers want to watch you, isn't it? It has to be you, your personality. You're given something, you're doing something that other people aren't, and they're going to want to tune in for that. So when it comes to visuals, there's opportunity here for you as well to set yourself apart. Maybe you've got some really cool layouts. For example, on PC, there is a lot of different options that you have. If you're artistic, you can just make your own. Unfortunately, there's a lot of us out there that aren't artistic. I mean, my efforts these are from years ago, was something like this. Oops, the actual consoles went quiet in the background. There we go. Just a very simple bar at the bottom, bar at the top, and a little boxy window over here where I had my webcam. And that was fine. That suited me. It was okay. Now, obviously, for your notifications and whatnot, you're going to have to, there's different ways to do this. You can either use little sources in OBS or XSplit. You can actually have programs running in the background that run text files, right? They'll actually generate text files every time you get a new follower or something. And then you can just have those displayed. Likewise, there's all sorts of neat little effects where visual things might come up, GIFs. Sounds are made. There's a lot of options out there. Now, I'm not artistic at all. I've got zero talent. So an option for me could have been to maybe try to find someone to make layouts for me, or another option is just to use online solutions. So for example, I use on Mixer StreamYar. StreamYar is a nice all-in-one solution for me, right, where it allows me to, my donations can go through there, my follow notifications, host notifications. It's a handy tool for me because I have no talent for that type of thing. So what that basically does is it gives me just a nice little bar at the bottom. You can set this all up however you want, whatever color, transparency, location, all those types of things. And in that way, if there is a follow
less
or
talk
anything,
and
hey,
more
look,
action.
I've got built-in notifications, and then there's a bar up there that can adjust. For me, that works, but that's not to everyone's taste. Remember, your presentation is going to vary depending on what you need. If you're a speedrunner, you need a lot more information, or you likely want to put on more information for your viewers than, say, someone who plays first-person shooters. If you're just doing COD online, there's different data. Some rules of thumb, that things that you do want to display is, subscribers. You want a subscriber notification. Likewise, if someone donates money, or tips you, these are things that has become effectively the social norm in streaming. People give you money, and I hate to say expect, but it's nice to have some kind of recognition for that. When it comes into follow alerts and whatnot, that varies, and it's very much personal preference. I remember years ago on Twitch, it was an absolute no-no. You did not announce follows. It was just seen as a bit taboo, a bit, no, people didn't like it, and a lot of times if they saw themselves getting called out, they would immediately unfollow. But things have slightly changed where, I see a lot of small channels doing that and their community loves it. Likewise, I see a lot of channels that don't do it. I see channels that actually will have visual notifications that will just, like a ticker that shows the latest follows, but they don't make a big deal. There is no right or wrong answer here. You will get people trying to tell you, oh no, don't do this, don't do that. Nobody can tell you what to do. Yes, they're going to give you their opinion and maybe what they perceive as what worked for them. It doesn't necessarily mean it is the perfect way to do things. Your community will guide you. If you've got your viewers or your moderators, if your subs are telling you, hey, you know what? Look, come on, you've got this many followers, you don't need to announce them anymore, then fair enough. And that seems to be the natural progression for most streamers. Once they get to a certain point, they realize that, well, actually calling out every single follow is just unrealistic, especially if you're getting a high amount of traffic. Half of the stream ends up being calling people out, in a good way. So it's something to think about. I know there's a nice drive initially when you're trying to build a channel and you want to welcome everyone on board, but you might find yourself, you get to a certain point where that's not necessarily the case anymore. But again, only you can make that decision. But when it comes to layouts, it's really up to you. What has been quite popular recently has been minimalist types of setups, where maybe things aren't always there, but when things happen, they'll pop out. Whether it's a notification or something, or likewise, the setup I use is relatively minimalist. But likewise, you can have, depending if you're doing something special, maybe you're doing a charity stream for Extra Life, then, something like this would fit the bill. Or maybe, for different things, like if you've got a chat cam or something, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want, right? You can have crazy graphics out the wazoo. It's just a case of do what's right for you. If you copy someone just 100% absolute, people are going to pick up on that. Do something original if you can, or take inspiration from other people. Because remember, when we talked about this in the first episode, where the key ingredient is you, what makes you special? If you're just using a cookie cutter layout with no kind of added little twists, then people might not like that. But again, it's a chance for you to make a kind of you know, a personal expression of what you want your channel to be. Again, my only reason for using what I use is because I have no artistic talent, and you know, hey, I just need that information displayed for my audience. So, presentation, right? That's basically it in a nutshell. You do what feels right for you. Look out there, look for guides, watch people that you like, and just figure out for yourself. You can come up with something, surely. Let's talk about lighting, right? Lighting is really, really important. Once you've introduced a camera, lighting is something that, you know, any photographer out there knows the importance of exposure, of aperture, of lighting a subject correctly. And you yourself will know if you're trying to take a picture of someone, you know, it needs to be lit well, or you need to have a flash if you don't. But then when it comes into light sources as well, you have to be careful. You know, you don't want to take a picture of someone that has the sun behind them, you know, unless you're making a lot of adjustments. So lighting is often something that streamers, at least when we're starting out, we forget about. For most of us, you know, if you're just in a normal room, it might not be much of an issue, because you'll have overhead, you know, ceiling lights, or you might have really good desk lamps, or you know, freestanding lamps that light up the entire room. You know, so lighting might not be an issue for you. But then once you introduce a green screen, now all of a sudden those normal items, you know, just that one ceiling light might not be enough, because with a green screen comes all sorts of problems, you know, or a blue screen, or a black screen, a white screen, whatever color screen you're using to take away the background, you know, to seamlessly put yourself in to your stream. You'll encounter a lot of issues, a lot of problems, mainly due to shadows. And you want to try to get a nice even lighting. I mean, as you can see, I mean, my setup is far from ideal, but I've had some very unique problems because I am not in a large room, as you can see. Right, I'm in quite a small area. So let me just switch real quick, and I'll take you for a brief rundown of my problem and how I solved it without spending too much money. So one of the most challenging environments that you may have to deal with is if you have a small enclosed space, or likewise a space that doesn't have much natural lighting. Prime example is what I currently deal with, which is a small understairs closet, as you can see. Right, so there's no real natural light aside from what is already, you know, kind of coming in through the living room. So this presents quite a few different challenges, even more so compounded by the fact that I'm using a green screen. But being someone who's on a budget, I've, you know, found various solutions that are quite inexpensive. If you're using a green screen, one of the main considerations is lighting. But not just lighting for yourself, lighting for the screen as well. Because the biggest enemy of a green screen user is shadows. And so this is why people resort to using, you know, expensive soft boxes, you know, the type of enclosures where you're not getting direct light, because they generally don't generate much shadow. But there's a few ways that you can kind of combat this. So in my setup, for example, as you can imagine, down in the corners at the bottom is a prime area where I might get quite a bit of shadow. So I've just got these little lights up here on this shelf, which give me, you know, quite a bit of good direct light, and you know, straight on the green screen itself. But as you can see, there's shadows coming down, you know, from these raised areas and whatnot. So I've just got some cheap little LEDs, you know, which stick on up here. I use rechargeable batteries, right? So, you know, it's not too expensive, and, you know, that'll just shine a little bit of extra light where it needs to go. I have other ones here as well, but I don't currently use those. But I've got desk lamps, right? I don't use any kind of specialist soft boxes, because let's be honest, this area, there just isn't enough room for something like that. So I've got these adjustable LEDs, and there's 3 different light settings I can do. I can do just a very nice, you know, this is fine for doing office work or something. but not great for lighting, you know, for streaming, for broadcasting and whatnot. But it's got these higher settings. As you can see, I've got 3 settings. So I tend to go on a middle setting for these. Hold on, let me find my other one. There we go. Right, so these are relatively bright, but by using 2 of them like this, right, one on either side, that gives, you know, instead of having direct light right on my face, the light is kind of more traveling, you know, in a straight, direct way. So as you can see, I've cut down on a lot of shadow. Now, okay, when I'm sitting here like that, most of the shadow is just directly behind me, so it's not going to interfere too much with my chroma settings. As you can see, it's not perfect. You know, I do still have a little bit of shadow here, and also just a little bit of shadow there, but it's enough that the green screen appears to work just fine. So, you know, all in all, this is relatively inexpensive. I mean, this is just fabric, I believe bought from Amazon. It was only a few pounds, you know, probably not more than $10. These little rechargeable lights up here, these are great actually, because they just plug in, they charge via USB, and they've got great you know, illumination as well as lifetime. Those are relatively inexpensive as well. I mean, probably only about 14 British pounds. And then these little things up here, these actually need recharged. They generate quite a good amount of light, and they are adjustable. You know, you can rotate them as need be. For the longest time I had just those in here, but again, those are only, you know, a few quid, and the desk lamps themselves, you know, they're really not that expensive. But you know, it works out quite well, because then, you know, you're sitting down, you're gaming, and you don't really have the lights in your eyes, but it's giving you enough light to successfully, you know, stream with a green screen. If you're not using a green screen, then you don't need as much light. You know, you'll be able to get away with just front lighting. So as you can see, right, understairs closet, it's naturally dark. Once I have this door closed, there is no natural light coming in, and so the steps that I took involve just household items, relatively inexpensive, and it works for me. Is it amazing? Is it, you know, the same level of quality as, for example, purchasing one of these beautiful professional softbox sets, you know, with an actual green screen, or maybe, you know, the Elgato green screen that is a beautiful piece of tech. You know, it's effectively just a roll-up projector screen that's been, you know, made out of green fabric. You know, those are great, but they're quite expensive. And likewise, a big softbox is unrealistic for me in here. Where would I even put one? You know, it'd have to stand up somewhere between me and my PC, or I'd have to mount something into the ceiling here. It just wasn't realistic for me. If you've got a large room, you know, whether it's your bedroom, whether you've got a separate office, then yeah, of course, a softbox is ideal. You know, that is great, but also, that's a lot of money. You know, it's a tricky one here, because you may want to invest money into your stream, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for someone like me, who streaming was just a hobby, I couldn't justify that investment. Now you might say, well look, hey, I'm serious though, I'm going for partner, so I am going to invest all of this money. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Go for it. I'm just trying to give you a few tips, and look, you know, you can save a few bucks here and there whilst you're in this type of, you know, transient phase, or you're not sure, or even if you maybe don't want to realistically do this full time. You know, there is some cheap ways to get around it, as you can see in my setup. But yeah, you know, when it comes to lighting, it is really important, because what ends up happening is your camera needs, you know, quite a bit of light so you can set your exposure down. If you have your webcam set up for too much exposure and too much gain, the picture quality is really going to suffer. And also it's going to be using a lot of processing power to try to make the picture look better. Speaking of processing power, one of the biggest things you can do with any webcam is turn off that autofocus feature. This is just personal preference, but I can't stand it when, you know, like anytime someone brings their hands up and the focusing changes, it's just not a pretty thing to see at all. But cameras, you know, when it comes to your actual camera choices, go with whatever you can afford, right? I mean, the C920 webcam from Logitech has long been a favorite of most streamers. Now, yes, they did release a 922, which claims to be, you know, a lot better and improved, but let's be honest, the 922 is slightly improved. Some people debate that it actually has worse picture quality. It introduces this whole thing about, oh, background removal. Yes, but it does it via software. If you're using OBS or XSplit, you have that ability already. So why not save a bit of money and go with a 920? There's plenty of reviews out there where you can see firsthand, well, secondhand, but you know, get people's opinions on the 922 versus the 920. They're very, very similar. The 920 tends to cost about 30% less, but the pros of the 922 is it does have a slightly better contrast and color. So if you've got the money, it might be worth it. But a good one to keep your eye on is Razer. Razer has the Kaio, which the Kaio, I believe was at E3 it was shown off, or at Gamescom? I think it was E3. And this is a little bit of expensive for a USB webcam, but one of the features that's really nice about it is it has built-in illumination. These ring lights are getting more and more popular with broadcasters because they give you really nice even lighting. And you know, I've seen quite a bit of footage myself, and because you wouldn't think, oh, is that really going to illuminate things that much? And honestly, it really, really does. So that's a wonderful, if space is limited and you can't do light boxes, or likewise you don't want to do all this excessive lighting that I've done, the Razer Kaio might be a very good solution for you. Just keep in mind that's going to give you great direct lighting. You're still going to need to do something for your green screen. So speaking of green screens, I thought I would get myself back to where I'm at. As you can see, you know, it's having a green screen is nice. It's not for everyone. If you have a really nice area, you know, like if your office has cool posters in the background, or you've got, you know, a really nice set of bookshelves with some kind of techie or video game swag on it, then by all means, you know, go for that. This is another aspect of streaming that seems to come and go in waves. All of us, you know, for quite a while there, it was, you had to have a green screen. If you weren't using a green screen, you know, you just looked amateurish. And then all of a sudden, people started making these beautiful displays, you know, almost like murals, setting up these sets, so to speak, and really going with that. And that next thing you know, that became the really popular thing to do. Whereas now, I think we've finally reached the point where just do whatever you want to. You know, sometimes it's great to have a green screen so you can just plop yourself down in the corner. And other times it's nice, you know, when you're chatting with your viewers or something, to have, you know, that kind of home experience, you know, or something nice in the background for them. So there's plenty of options there when it comes to that. I did want to discuss very briefly this whole argument about webcams versus using a digital camera. And, you know, yes, a digital camera, you know, a really high quality DSLR is going to give you a better image quality. We know this, right? There's no argument about that. The problem is accessibility. If you've got one lying about, then great. You could use that potentially, as long as you have a way to capture it. Remember, you're going to either want the specific Elgato cam link that they have that allows you to do that, or as long as your camera has an HDMI out, if you've got a capture card, you'll be able to capture it that way as well. There's just some things to keep in mind. With DSLRs, you run the risk of sensor burnout, depending on the brand and the model. DSLRs are meant for photography, right? They're meant to take photos. Occasionally, you can take video with them, but they're not necessarily designed to be in a constant video mode for hours upon hours. And a lot of early adopters of DSLRs noticed this. And the actual sensors in the camera, because remember, it's still, even though it's digital, it's still an actual camera. Most of them have a lens, you know, a mirror type setting, you know, that reflects the light and whatnot. And these sensors were burning out because these sensors get hot, you know, and they get hot quite quickly. When you're taking a photo, it's just a burst of heat. And likewise, if you're taking a short video, it'll get up to, you know, maybe its thermal limit, but at least, you know, you end up stopping and then it'll cool down. Whereas if your DSLR is just sitting there constantly on for a 4, 5, 6 hour stream, you do run the risk of burning it out. Again, it depends on the brand, the model you're using. Not all DSLRs are created the same. I just rule them out for me personally. I just see it as a very expensive piece of equipment. And to be fair, if you have your webcam set up correctly, you're using a decent resolution, you know, most people won't be able to tell much of a difference. With YouTubers and people who are making recorded video content, it's a tougher sell. You know, yes, you very may well want to invest in a DSLR, but for strictly streaming purposes, if you've got the money, go for it. But it's by no means a requirement in this day and age. What is a requirement in this day and age, in my opinion, is a microphone, right? More often than not, we start off with a headset, and it's fine, right? A headset will kind of get you through, it'll do what you need it to do. But the minute you get an actual decent microphone, it's just a huge game changer. You know, somebody could have the most amazing visuals in the world, really nice production value, you know, really nice intros and be right back screens. But for me personally, if their audio is lackluster, it's just a huge turnoff. So audio for me personally is just a really, really huge thing. You might not be that concerned. And if so, well, you know, that's fine. But investing in decent audio, it's just a really smart investment, because even for all your other aspects, using Discord, playing games, you know, if you've got a PC set up, you know, you'll use this for everything. Your party chat on Xbox, it's just a really, really good tool. Remember, on console, there are microphone options. Like for the Xbox, there's the Stream Mic from Turtle Beach, which is supposed to work relatively well. But on PC, you have all of these options. If you want to go crazy, you can get an XLR microphone, which is, they tend to use phantom power. So now we're talking about preamps, we're talking about EQs, we're talking about mixers. You know, that's great. You can go that route. You know, or you can, I hate saying go cheap, but you know, you can get just a USB microphone. If you go to Amazon and search around, there's all sorts of inexpensive, well, let's be honest, cheap, really horrible cheap ones. But then there's affordable ones like the Blue Snowball. Blue Yetis are, you know, a little bit up there more in price, but they're good quality bits of equipment. The Auna mics are ones that I really like. They're quite inexpensive, but they're of good quality. You know, again, it's about getting what you can afford. But when it comes into microphones, you need to know that there's basically, not all microphones are created equal, and it very much depends on what you need them for. Most people, or I say people, most streamers tend to go with a condenser mic. Now, a condenser mic, you know, basically, they're used to pick up detail, right? They're usually fantastic, but at the same time, a condenser mic can also pick up background noise if you don't have them set up correctly. A condenser mic can quite often get quite a bit of reverb, like me, prime example in this room, reverb out the wazoo. You can battle a little bit of this if you get, you know, sound dampening materials and whatnot. But yeah, condenser mics tend to be what most people use, like, because they're really good for vocals. You know, you have dynamic mics, which I've seen quite a few streamers that do like dynamic mics. They're not great with subtle stuff. So if you're quite soft-spoken and talk quietly, a dynamic mic probably isn't for you. You know, but a dynamic mic on the other hand can be used for everything. You know, they tend to be used when they're close to the source, and you know, a lot of folk really do like them. And then you also have ribbon mics, which ribbon mics are absolutely ancient. These are the ones that back in the 1930s, those big massive microphones, those all tended to be ribbon mics. You know, and they're kind of making a comeback because of the retro kind of, you know, movement. But they're actually really good for musical instruments, right? If you're using, you know, drums, you know, or even like in a room or something, a ribbon mic will probably work. But for most streamers, a condenser mic is probably what you're going to go for. But even then, not all condenser mics are created equal. Yes, the brands, the pricing, all that, but the actual pattern of the microphone itself inside, right? There's 4 major types. You've got cardioid, supercardioid, omni, and figure 8. For example, this is a cardioid pattern. So basically, the easiest way to visualize this is the actual element that picks the noise up in a cardioid pattern is basically like a fan, right? A fan that's opened up, right? It's there's actually a little if you can see on the back here, no, oops, as it tries to drop. If I pull up this image here, you can see there's a pattern here that kind of shows the way it works out. So on a cardioid mic, you know, it's basically gathering sound in this kind of this frontal kind of range and the top as well. It won't gather sound very much from the back. It'll pick up a little bit, you know, but a cardioid is what most streamers tend to go with. You do have a supercardioid, which is just got a much tighter pickup area, whereas this will, for the most part, pick up in, you know, 180 degrees or whatever, more than that actually. A supercardioid is much tighter. But then you also have omni, and omni tends to be good for if, say, you're going to be doing a podcast and you're all in the same room. Omni microphones pick up sound from every single direction, you know, like a globe mic, almost, you know, our conference microphone. So those are quite handy, but again, for a single streamer, probably not the best choice. And then you've got a figure 8. So imagine, you know, how a figure 8 looks, right? Microphone's right in the middle of that. It'll pick up things from the front, the back, but not from the side. So that's pretty good. If anything, a figure 8 would be a decent option for me in this room, because obviously I've got sound waves bouncing all over the place. And with a figure 8 mic, I would not be picking up sound from the left and right, or, well, in this case, the way the microphone's sitting at the moment, it wouldn't be picking up noise from down the way or up the way, because even that's important. The way that you have your mic placed is going to change the way things sound. You know, whether you're talking directly into it like this, or if you're trying to back yourself away from it, you know, and maybe instead of talking at the mic, you're talking over the mic. You know, a lot of people do that, where they'll have the microphone, oops, I'm loosening this off a little bit, but you know, where it's down and low and actually speaking above and over. And then you've got other people that, you know, like to get up nice and close to the microphone like this, and you know, they just like the way that is. Just do what works for you. You know, it's going to depend a lot on your setup, whether or not you're peaking, and all that type of thing, but there's plenty of options out there. But yes, personally, I think audio is one of the most important things to invest in. For the longest time, I didn't have a webcam. You know, I had a pretty crappy piece of kit I was using, but a microphone was my first actual purchase. Again, I just got one that was relatively inexpensive. It's just a cardioid mic, nothing fancy, plugs into the USB, job done. But they've got some amazing microphones out there that are actually multi-use, where you can choose whether you want it to be cardioid, if you want it to be figure 8, if you want it to be omni. Again, it's just about your budget. But honestly, audio is a really big deal. And then Yes, if you're like me and in a small environment, I really should use some type of sound dampening, because unfortunately I do get quite a bit of reverb. But yeah, audio, video, presentation in a nutshell. These are all aspects that are important, because, as you want to grow, as you want to get out there more, you do notice yourself starting to focus more on these things. You start putting these, I won't say obstacles, but we tend to feel, something, I need to grow more, I need to do this, I need to look more professional. You don't need to, but of course it's only understandable that you want to. So these are all types of ways that, things at your disposal to help you do that, is things like overlays, decent camera equipment. If you have decent camera equipment, lighting the area properly, decent audio equipment, all of these things are going to help you out and just increase your presentation value when it comes to the stream itself. Speaking of growing, that is going to be next episode of Streaming Fundamentals, is we're going to talk about channel growth. We're going to talk about the theories of it, because there's a lot out there. Just about everything you ever hear is based off people's personal experiences. What has worked for them? And we'll just see. We'll just see how we get on. Right. Thank you for watching, and catch you next time.